In the video on the characteristics of quality questions, you learned that you can pose questions in a sequence. This is so that each succeeding question builds on the answer to the previous one. Now, what are some ways you can sequence your questions? Consider the following 6 patterns. 1. Same path. This involves posing questions that are all at the same cognitive level to extend thinking. For example, when questioning what students know about the grammatical rule of subject-verb agreement, you could ask, what is the subject in this sentence? What is the verb in this sentence? What are the types of clauses in the sentence? And what does it mean to have subject-verb agreement? This questioning pattern uses specific questions that are all at lower cognitive levels of remembering and understanding. You could also ask specific questions at a higher cognitive level. 2. Extend and lift. Begin by asking a series of questions at the same cognitive level to extend thinking. Then lift the questions to the next level. For example, when reviewing students' understanding of how subject-verb agreement applies in a sentence, you could first ask students all the previous questions to extend their thinking, and then ask, why does the subject-verb agreement rule apply only to one type of clause in a sentence? This last question requires students to lift their thinking to a higher cognitive level, analyzing, to answer the question. 3. Circular path. Pose a series of questions that eventually lead back to the initial position or question. For example, if you begin with, which of the 3 responses to the principal's question is the most appropriate? You could pose questions that require students to establish criteria on appropriateness, such as purpose, audience, context, and culture, before returning to the initial question. 4. Narrow to broad. Start with cognitively lower level specific questions. Progressively, lead your students to respond to higher level general questions. For example, when helping students to engage with the text on global warming and climate change, you could begin with specific questions at the lower cognitive levels, such as, what is climate change? And what are the causes of climate change? You could follow up with a question at a higher cognitive level, such as, how is global warming related to climate change? You could then end with a broad question, such as this one at the evaluating level. How seriously should we take recent climate change? 5. Broad to narrow. This questioning pattern is also called funneling. You can use it to take students progressively from general to more specific questions. For example, when designing a lesson to enable students to evaluate how effectively a writer achieves impact through organizing ideas in a text on global warming, you could begin with cognitively lower level general questions followed by higher level more specific questions. You could then end with a specific question, such as this one at the creating level. 6. Backbone of key questions with probing questions. In this questioning pattern, the focus is not on the cognitive level of the questions, but on how closely they relate to the central theme, issue, or subject of the discussion. For example, imagine you're engaging students in a discussion on how language and the visuals in a text contribute to the levels of meaning in its message. Imagine the text is a public service television commercial to encourage energy conservation. You could use a questioning sequence that is built on a series of key questions together with relevant probing questions. The target audience of the TV commercial, the persuasive techniques used, the literal and underlying meanings of the message, and how the TV commercial could be done differently. Of course, effective use of questioning in the classroom is not about sticking closely to particular question sequences. Listen to your students, because their questions, responses, and comments are also important in the teaching and learning process. Understanding how to pose quality questions and how to use question sequences effectively can foster a climate of meaningful classroom conversations. Asking quality questions in appropriate sequences can enhance thinking and learning.